I can't do okay, this is really weird. I can't do what's it called? Mimicking? I can't
Impersonations?
do impersonations, but I can do accents. How does that work? And I can make funny voices. I just can't sound like anybody else. I don't get it. I don't know. You feel like that'd be part of the same part of your brain, right? If you can fake an accent, then you would also presumably be able to sound like somebody else.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing chapter 12 this week, Alliances. We start with Paragon.
And this is also the start of winter.
Yes. I don't even know what it was when we first started. Probably like spring or summer. No, I'm in like the first book.
Oh, the very first book.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that was only 10 chapters ago.
Well, it would have
11.
been fall, actually. Or summer, depending on how she does the two summers, not spring.
Well, she came back, so it'd probably be spring when we started the book.
Yeah, maybe.
Because she was coming back from and then she does a winter stint on the boat where she peels the skin off the seals or whatever.
The Reaper.
Yeah. So I think the very start is spring.
So it's been like
a year and a half.
Almost 2 years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. We start with Paragon, as I mentioned before, and Brashen is quietly talking to him. Paragon, what am I to do with you? There did not seem to be any anger in it, only sorrow. Paragon didn't reply. He mentions that since Brashen had ordered no one to talk to him, he hasn't spoken either.
Yeah, and interestingly, when we left off with that order being given, we had Paragon's point of view, and he talked about how he knew Lavoy was going to break that order and come talk to him anyway, so it didn't matter what Brashen had to say. But then here we have him talking about how even when Lavoy comes to talk to him, he doesn't respond at all. So I thought that was a really interesting development.
Mm-hmm. And Paragon says when the mate had shifted his attempts to sympathy, it had been harder to keep his resolve, but he had. If Lavoy had really thought Brashen had wronged him, he would have done something about it. That he hadn't just proved that he was truly on Brashen's side. So again, from a point of view from Paragon where it's kind of beaten into the reader that he is unstable.
Yeah.
He has severe mood swings and had severe swings of thought and like changes of thought and perspectives on situations.
Yeah, I almost thought you were going to say delusions there, which isn't quite right. I mean, that's like my own word that I'm bringing into this, but it does feel a little bit like delusions in a similar vein to the way Kenneth thinks, where everybody's against you. If they're not visibly for you, they're against you.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before, how they're both very, very paranoid about things, but it's not even, like you said, it's not even delusions really or anything like that. It's just shifting the way he thinks.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh yeah, Lavoy is on my side. Lavoy and I are in this together. He calls me laddie and it's great. And now this chapter, he's like, no one likes me. Everyone's against me.
Yeah, I hate everybody equally. They're all against me. I don't know, it's a very interesting change up. And I don't necessarily think it's a mistake in the writing or that it was not done on purpose. I think it does just, like you said, go to show his instability.
Yeah, because Paragon does shift in this point of view again.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely not a mistake at all.
Right.
He's done it multiple times in these books so far. Brashen is grabbing the railing and Paragon he's almost flinching with the depth of sorrow that Brashen is feeling at that point and the misery. He wasn't truly his family, so he could not always read Brashen's emotions. But at times like this, when there was contact between flesh and wizardwood, Paragon knew him well enough. This isn't how I imagined it would be, Ship, Brashen told him. To be captain of a live ship. You want to know what I dreamed? that somehow you would make me real and solid. Not a knockabout sailor who had disgraced his family and forever lost his place in Bingtown. Captain Trell of the live ship Paragon. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? I thought we would redeem each other, ship. I pictured us returning to Bingtown triumphant. Me commanding a sharp crew and you sailing like a gray-winged gull. People would look at us and say, "Now there's a ship, and the man who runs him knows what he's about." And the families that discarded us both might suddenly wonder if they hadn't been fools to do so. Brashen gave a small snort of contempt for his foolish dreams. He goes on to say that he can't imagine life would ever be like that or that simple. He can't imagine that his father would ever take him back. And, well, a captain's life is lonely. It's not like I'm going to find a woman that will put up with me for more than a season. But I thought, with a live ship, at least we'd always have each other. I honestly thought I could do you some good. I imagined that someday I'd laid myself down and die on your deck, knowing that a part of me would go on with you. That didn't seem like such a bad thing at one time. But now look at us. I've let you kill again. We're sailing straight into pirate waters with a crew that can't even get out of its own way. I haven't a plan or a prayer for any of us to survive, and we draw closer to Divvytown with each wave we cut. I'm more alone than I've ever been in my life.
I think this is a really good insight into Brashen and where his mind has been at. And it's a little sad, obviously, because it seems like he's given up hope. But
we know he hasn't given up hope.
Right, not fully, but he is feeling the despair of your dreams not coming true the way that you want them to in this moment, I think. But it's really interesting that in his perfect world, his dream outcome from this is that he is accepted again, and that his family feels bad for what they did, and he's accepted, even though he knows that even if he did this well, that's never going to happen. That's not who his dad is. That's not how things work. But I don't know. It just makes me feel really sad that he feels that without this, like captaining a live ship well, he is nothing. And I wonder if that's something that happened to him, or that thought is something that has trailed him because of who he is. Like, he's the first son in an old trader family.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he was supposed to be captain of a live ship. So,
and
I don't
he
know.
Flunked and failed out of that life. So if he can prove that he was worthy of it, then, he's redeemed himself in his own eyes.
Right. And so I think that's really interesting. And I think, again, we have somewhat of a parallel between Brashen and Kennett, where it's two very different paths being taken, but kind of a lot of similarities there, where they both feel as though they deserve a live ship, maybe. I feel like it's not as bad as that on Brashen's end, but it kind of feels like he thinks he should be able to do this. He deserves this chance to prove everybody wrong. I don't necessarily think that's a negative, but I think it sounds a little bit negative the way I'm phrasing it. But yeah, I don't know. I just find that really interesting to see two people whose lives were changed when they were young, one from choosing vices and the other from a sneak attack on his home.
Right.
And then both have run-ins with pirates. And I don't know, just like seeing how different they are. Obviously, very different circumstances, but there is a little bit of a sliver of duality there. But Paragon's not really having any of this.
Paragon is trying to goad Brashen into anger.
His anger is easier for Paragon to deal with. So he says, "And Althea is furious with you. Her anger is so strong it's gone from hot to cold." He had hoped it would goad Brashen into fury. Anger he could deal with better than his deep melancholy. To deal with anger, all you had to do was shout back louder than your opponent. Instead, he felt himself the horrible lurch of Brashen's heart. That, too, Brashen admitted miserably, and I don't know why she scarcely speaks to me.
She talks to you, Paragon retorted angrily. Cold silence belonged to him. No one could do it as well as he, certainly not Althea.
That is kind of funny.
It's like, no, she talks. She's not like me. I can keep a silence.
Yeah, and as he's talking when he was supposed to be ignoring Brashen. No, I think it's interesting to know that in this moment, at least, Paragon thinks that the way to fight anger is just be the louder one. That's how you win.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's such a child in development, you know?
Yeah.
Developmentally, I guess.
Yeah.
Socially, he's not, has not matured much.
True.
So Brashen kind of agrees with that, and Paragon can tell these words are spilling out of him that if Brashen could stop, he would take back and not say. But it's that she talks all right, but it's just workplace talk. It's yes, sir, no, sir, and just cold eyes that barely even look at me at all. And he says, and I need her to back me up if nothing else. I need one person in this crew that I know won't put a knife in my back. But she just stands there and looks past me or through me, and I feel like I'm less than nothing. No one else can make me feel that bad, and it makes me just want to. His words trailed off. Just throw her on her back and take her. That would make you real to her. Paragon filled in for him. Surely that would bring a rise from Brashen. Brashen's silent revulsion followed his words. No explosion of fury or disgust. After a moment, the man asked quietly, "Where did you learn to be this way?" So we get a little perspective from Paragon because we've had phrases and words from Paragon that are meant to bring a rise to people from other people's points of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've had a couple times with Paragon, but this is a very obvious and blatant, just display from him to get a rise out of somebody. And it's for a specific reason. It's to make somebody angry so he can just yell and then be quiet and ignore them because he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't respond to emotion well.
Yeah.
So these words that he's saying isn't necessarily what Paragon believes.
Right.
In this scene or in the other previous ones, but it's just something to evoke that response that he wants to stop the conversation.
Right. It does feel sort of like when a kid says something shocking to get a reaction.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily that they really think like that or mean whatever they're saying. They just know that it has a certain reaction from people. And I think here, especially with something as dark as what he's suggesting, it's so shocking that it's kind of just like, what made you this way? Like, how are you acting like this?
The Ludlucks I've known didn't have rape and murder in them. So
Why? Yeah. Like, yeah, sure.
Where
They're
did
penny
you learn
pinchers
this?
and
Yeah.
like shrewd, but other than that, they're not bad people. And I think that's really interesting because it goes back to, I think we had this discussion last chapter with Paragon. Nobody knows about the pirates on Paragon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just coming out of nowhere to Brashen and other people whenever he talks like this or says crazy things. It's like, oh, there's something wrong with him and not, let's look deeper into what made him this way. But we do finally get that question of like, why are you the way that you are?
Mm-hmm.
And Paragon doesn't necessarily tell the full truth.
No, he says, perhaps the Ludlucks I knew weren't so fastidious. I've known rape and murder plenty, Brashen, right on my deck where you're standing. In his head, he thinks, and perhaps I am more than a thing shaped by the Ludlucks. Perhaps I had form and substance long before Ludluck set a hand to my wheel.
Right.
Another little hint that Paragon knows about his dragon selves.
Yes. And I do want to point out the Ludlucks that have had control over Paragon were not necessarily good people. And I think later we get the tale of what happened.
They weren't bad people either.
No. But doesn't one of them, I don't know, one of them does something really bad to or like abuses people on the ship or
Oh,
something.
maybe. I don't
I
know.
feel like one of them is kind of like cold-hearted and awful, but I don't know obviously for sure. But obviously the stuff that he's talking about is not from the Ludlucks.
Yeah.
That's more
Ygritte.
Ygritte. And I think it's interesting that he's not making that clarification. He's not telling anybody, which is loyalty to Kennit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Kennit said,
Don't tell anybody.
yeah, don't tell anybody and die. And since he can't die, he's still going to hold on to the don't tell anybody, even though he's really mad at Kennit right now.
Brashen remains silent to Paragon, and Paragon finally asks, "Do you fear me?" "I have to," Brashen replied simply. "There was a time when we were only friends. I thought I knew you well. When you killed that man, Paragon, when I saw you shake his life out of him, something changed in my heart. So, yes, I fear you. That is not good for either of us." He lifts his hands and starts to walk away, and Paragon tries to think of words that would bring him back, and suddenly he didn't want to be alone. So he shouts Brashen back out to him. His captain halted uncertainly. Then he made his way back across the rising and falling deck to stand once more by the railing. "Paragon? I can't promise not to kill again. You know that." He struggled for justification. "You yourself might need me to kill, and then there I'd be, bound by my promise. I know. I tried to think of what I would ask you. Not to kill, to obey my orders always, and I knew you, and I knew you could never promise those things." In a heavy voice, he said, "I don't ask for those promises. I don't want you to lie to me." He suddenly felt very sorry for Brashen. He hated it when his feelings switched back and forth like this, but he couldn't control them. Impulsively, he offered, "I promise I won't kill you, Brashen. Does that help?" He felt Brashen's convulsion of shock at his words. Paragon suddenly realized that Brashen had never even considered the ship might kill him. That Paragon would now promise thus made him realize that the ship had been capable of it, was still capable of it, if he decided to break his word. After a moment, Brashen said lifelessly, "Of course that helps. Thank you, Paragon." He starts to turn away again, and Paragon calls after him, like, "Wait, are you going to let the others talk to me now?" Like, "Of course. And not much sense in refusing you that." It doesn't turn out the way that Paragon wants that conversation to turn out, even
Yeah.
as his feelings change. Bitterness rises in him because he wanted to comfort Brashen.
Yeah, he thought he was being nice by saying, I promise not to kill you.
But then in the middle of this, of being like, "Oh, I was trying to comfort him," he says, or he thinks, "They were never satisfied, no matter what you sacrificed for them." So there's still those running thoughts, that quick shift, and Paragon, says it earlier on to himself that he hates how his feelings change so swiftly.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of that is due to the fact that he is two dragons. And so
Yeah,
it's a little bit of like personality
conflicting personalities.
dominance.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. It's, I think, really sad to watch Paragon struggle with this. And he is frustrated because he doesn't understand why Brashen wouldn't be happy with this. He's like, come on, I'm trying to be nice. And now Brashen doesn't care. And why hadn't he realized that the first ones to kill were the ones closest to you, the ones who knew you best? It was the only way to eliminate the threat to yourself. What was the sense of killing a stranger? Strangers had small interest in hurting you. That was always done best by your own family and friends. And that's such a sad way to think.
yeah,
And it is,
that's
a,
his experience.
yeah, that's his experience. Kennit and Ygritte and Kennet's dad, the Ludlucks who have sailed him before. I feel
Hmm.
like he has just had disappointment after disappointment in his life. And so that's just what he expects.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I was wondering, especially because he says that you have to kill people that are close to you so they don't disappoint you. Is that part of Kennit saying that? Or is that part of Kennit that we see the part Paragon has left in Kennit? Like, is this
Um,
Paragon or is this Kennit?
I don't know. Doesn't have to be one part or the other. It could just be knowledge that they've shared together or anything. Or I feel like that is something that Paragon could have learned before Kenneth was born.
Mm,
So I don't know. I think that's just part of Paragon.
okay. So then do you think that since Kenneth has similar views, he got that from Paragon?
Maybe. I don't know. I guess that it could just been something that a thought that they shared together, because it's something that Paragon learned when he was young, and that's something that Kenneth learned when he was young, just separately.
Yeah. Okay.
We switch over to Tintaglia's point of view. Tintalia's, lasagnas, and Tintaglia is frustrated. She's been searching for her kind, and twice she has seen serpents, but when she's flown low down to them, they dive as if they're afraid of her. And so she doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, she's increasingly frustrated, not just at how the world has changed, but just how she doesn't know what's happening. She doesn't know what to expect, what to do.
Hunting is poor as well because things have changed since she was around. So she describes like the whole edge of the continent has sunk into the water. Tops
Yeah.
of mountain ranges are now islands. The inland plains are now the swampy lands that are the rain wilds.
Mm-hmm.
So things have drastically changed, and her own kind doesn't recognize her.
And on top of that, humans have multiplied.
Yeah,
So now there are way more humans on the earth than there were ever before.
their dirty, smoky settlements littered the world.
She felt a grudging admiration for humanity's ability to engineer a home for itself wherever it pleased, even as she rather despised creatures so helpless they could not cope with the natural world without artificial structures.
It's really interesting to read these passages of her hunts because we have a whole series, a whole trilogy of books here talking about travel distances by ship and how
Right.
long it takes to get somewhere. And she's describing she's flying over island settlements that are obviously pirate isles
Mm-hmm.
and flying up the Rainwild River to Kelsingra. And it's taken like a week, week and a half,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we get all of these descriptions, and Tintaglia herself is very frustrated and feels a building rage of futility
Right.
because what is her life going to be now?
And what's the point? And if she has to live in this world by herself, she decides that she'd rather go live in Kelsingra because at least that has the memories of what life was.
Mm-hmm.
And
She recalls the Elderlings fondly, and she wished the Elderlings survived and humans did not.
right. And she talks about how it's annoying that humans are building these shelters. Like in Treehog, there's all these little nests in the trees, which are interesting.
A series of squirrel nests connected by spider webs,
Yeah.
she says.
It's like cool that they've figured out a way to survive in places that don't want them there. But at the same time, she's mad because what's the point of building something if it's not going to be beautiful? Like the Elderlings understood if you were going to build architecture, it should be beautiful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And these humans just don't understand that.
And welcoming for dragons, of course.
Also. Also that. But she's just having a really bad day, and it's raining and cold. And
she's watching the banks of the Rainwild River. Far upriver of Treehog, she spotted the struggling serpent. At first, she thought it was a log being rolled downstream by the river's current. She blinked and shook rainwater from her eyes and stared again. As the scent of serpent reached her, she dropped down from the heights to make sense of what she saw. The river was shallow, a rushing flow of milky water over rough stone. This too was a divergence from her memory. Once this river had offered a fine, deep channel that led far inland to cities such as Kelsingra and the farming communities and barter towns beyond it. Not only serpents, but great ships had navigated it with ease. Now the battered blue serpent struggled feebly against the current and waters that did not even cover it. She circled twice before she could find a stretch of river where she could land safely. And she waded downriver, hastened to the pitiful spectacle of the stranded serpent. And she gets up close and realizes that its condition is wretched. It's
Yeah.
obviously been in the sun for a long time, so it's sunbaked. There are wounds where the river water is eating away at, and the serpent is very, very rough condition.
Right. And it also says before getting into the condition of the serpent that the water was a very milky color because
Mhm.
of how acidic it's been since the earthquake that happened.
Yeah.
So it talks about how it's more, I guess, more acidic than normal, and that normally it wouldn't matter to dragons or the serpents, but because of the rocks that this serpent has been scraping against, trying to wiggle forward, that has created wounds that are being eaten at by the acid because it's getting past the scales.
Right. Yeah. Welcome home, she said, without sarcasm or bitterness. The serpent regarded her with one rolling eye and then suddenly redoubled its efforts to flail its way upstream. It fled from her. There was no mistaking its panic, nor the death stench upon it. Gently, gently, finned one. I have not come to harm you, but to aid you if I can. Let me push you into deeper water. Your skin needs wetting. The serpent stopped its struggling, but more from exhaustion than calm. Pentaglia tries again. I am here to welcome you and guide you home. Can you speak? Can you understand me? For a moment, the serpent just kind of lays there and then tries to erect its mane, but no venom comes out, and then says, Go away, kill you, it threatened. You are not making sense. I am here to help you. And then explains, what's going to happen. I'm going to help you wrapped in a cocoon. Winter will be here, but I'll guard over you and then scrape it away for the summer sun to wake you up. And then you should become a lord of the three realms. I promise you this. The serpent finally, in desperation, puts aside its distrust and agrees deeper water.
And
And Intalia's like, there's no deeper water.
yeah, she realizes that there's not really a way to help the serpent practically.
I have to drag it away.
Yeah, and she thinks about how she had let two humans ride on her, but that was nothing. This serpent is probably about the same weight as herself.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not going to be able to fly away with it to deeper water. And she's looking, there's nothing near. She's going to have to drag it to deeper water. And she doesn't even know if she can do that. And when she tries, she hurts the serpent.
Because the skin is so soft right now and
Yeah.
sun baked, and there's already wounds there, and it's being eaten away by the acid. So
And so it freaks out because it's hurt and hits her back.
And as she staggers away, her groping foot encountered something smooth, hard, and rounded in the bed of the river. It turned and cracked under her weight. Obeying a sudden impulse, she hooked her claws under it and dragged it up to the surface. A skull. A serpent's skull. The acid water of the river had etched the heavy bone to brittleness. It fragmented in her claws. She searched the shallows with heartsick certainty. Here were 3 thick spine bones, still clinging together. Another skull there. She clawed the bottom and came up with ribs and a jawbone in various stages of decomposition. Some still had bits of cartilage clinging to their joints. Others were polished smooth or eaten porous. The bones of her race were here. Those who had managed to recall this much of their migration route had met this final obstacle and perished here. The serpent was laying on its side, wheezing in pain. The creature briefly lidded its great eyes, then it gasped out a single word. Please. Tintaglia roars and lets the fury run free in her, let it cloud her mind and eyes to a scarlet haze. Then she granted its request and ends its misery.
So this is a lot of sadness.
Yep.
But especially because we have, to begin with, the realization of
Other
how bad
serpents
things,
have, yeah.
how bad things are. Like the fact that this is not the first serpent to try this, and this serpent seems to be almost beast like. It can still talk, which means that it's not full beast,
Yeah.
but it still doesn't recognize her.
It's just
And
driven by a biological need to go up here.
yeah, and I find that really interesting when you think about all the serpents that are still in the ocean that haven't made it this far.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, what about the serpents that have made it up this far? Like, were the
The lucky
bones?
few. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Or unlucky.
Mm-hmm.
But were those bones, any of those bones, do you think were like a she who remembers that got them that far, or
Who
just
knows? I
they
don't know.
lucked out, they figured out the right place to be?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just tough
Yeah.
and sad to see. And Tintaglia is once again confronted with the fact that she's the last of her kind, and
Mhm.
this is how it has to be. What can she do? She can't make the water deeper.
And as she bites the serpent, tastes the toxins on her tongue, in that instant, she knew his lifetime. Momentarily, she was him, and she trembled with exhaustion and pain. Permeating all was confusion. As Tintaglia regained herself, the utter futility of the serpent's life left her shaken. Time after time, his body had responded to the signs that told him to migrate and change. She could not tell how often the pathetic creature had left the rich feeding grounds of the south and migrated north. As she bent her neck and consumed his flesh, all became clear to her. His store of memories were added to her own. If the world had been turning as it should, she would have passed his memories on to her offspring, along with her own. Someone would have profited from his misspent life. He would not have died in vain. She saw all he had seen and been. She knew all his frustrations and was with him as frustration degenerated to confusion and finally bestiality. At every migration, he had searched for familiar seascapes and one who remembers. Time after time, he had been disappointed. Winters had driven him south again to feed and replenish his bodily reserves until the turning of the years would once more send him north.
So, just a quick pause. I think that's a really important detail. Turning of the years, plural. That means that the cycle has to be more than 1 year.
More
It's
than
not
one
just
year.
every year.
Right.
I guess we don't know how many years, but
Mhm. So, as you said, she's really zeroing in on the futility of this because she's thinking, oh, I know all of his memories, I know his life. If the world was fine, he wouldn't have died in vain here because I could pass these memories down to my offspring. But the world's not turning rightly, so he's probably just died in vain.
right.
No more memories to pass on at all.
And not only that, but now she knows a little bit she understands a little bit better why all these serpents are diving from her.
Yeah.
They don't know
Mm-hmm.
who she is. They are not the way they should be. And it's just been too long. And there's also the sadness that she realizes even if she could have helped this serpent into deeper waters, it still would have died.
Yeah.
It was too close to death. It wouldn't have worked out for the serpent either way.
Yeah, to go deeper, she would have to drag him back downstream, which is further away from food and further away from cocooning.
Mm-hmm.
She snorted to herself, lords of the three realms, rulers of earth, sea, and sky, yet masters of none of them. Because again, she's lamenting the fact that she can't make the river deeper.
Right.
The river was chilling her, and the acid kiss of its water was beginning to itch. Even her tightly scaled skin was not impervious to it when it ran this strong. She waded away from the bank to the center of the river, where there was an open sky overhead, stretched forth her wings, set her weight onto her hindquarters. She leapt, only to come down heavily in the water once more. The gravel had shifted under her clawed feet, spoiling her impetus. She was tired. She longing for the soft landing places and prepared grounds that the Elderlings had had, and if the Elderlings had survived, she reflected, her race would still flourish. They would have circumvented this shallow place in the river for the sake of their dragonkin. but the Elderlings had died off and left pathetic humanity as their heirs. She crouched in another attempt to fly, and then thinks, humans built things. Could humans dredge the river out? Could they channel the flow of water through this stretch to make it deep enough for a serpent? Could they coax the river to flow once more near the silvery earth needed for proper cocooning? She considered what she had seen of their works. They could, but would they? And now she thinks, what can I do to make them do this? Duress or bribe? Bargain or threaten?
Yeah.
Either way, she has a plan.
Yeah, there's something that can be done, and she's going to do it. But first, she needs to eat and sleep so she can think more clearly.
Yes.
I do want to ask a quick question. So, we've talked a lot about the Rainwild River and the acid properties of the water, how it's milky in color. And we've talked a little bit about how we believe that that is skill potentially, or the like,
Something about it, yeah.
yeah, something to do with skill. I was just wondering, does it prove that it's not the skill if the dragon or Tintaglia here doesn't get anything positive out of touching the skill?
Well, we know it's not just the skill in there too, right? Because otherwise, if the dragons that were born in the Rainwild Chronicles drink the water while it's milky, then they would be stronger faster, right? You know?
Fair, yeah.
But I don't know. It's very hard to tell because from questions that Robin Hobb has been asked, I feel like this is the river that Verity dipped his hands in to get silver on.
Right.
Obviously up near Kelsingra.
Mm-hmm.
But the earthquake shifted it to run deeper, and now it doesn't do that anymore.
Mm.
It's so vague. I don't know.
Well, because also, I mean, not to be a party pooper, but if this is the river that Verity dipped his hands in, does that mean that the silver was that strong all the way down the river, the Rainwild River, and like it should have coated the wizard wood in some way? Because I feel like wizard wood would have absorbed the silver somehow. I don't know. It just
No idea.
leaves me with a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the way that this river is.
Yeah. It's just acid, I guess.
Mm-hmm. We switch back over to Brashen's point of view. He's in his office, in his cabin, and waiting for Lavoy to come in because he summoned Lavoy, gets a knock, brings him in, and Lavoy greets him. You wanted to see me. Brashen noted the lack of a sir. Yes, I did, he agreed smoothly. There's rum on the sideboard. Take the chill off. Then I wish to give you some instructions. He notes that the rum was courtesy, due any mate, first mate that was coming in. But it seems that Lavoy is a little bit more open to everything after the rum.
Right. Like,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
he's going to treat me like I should be treated. Fine, that's good.
Yeah. And then he says, thank you, sir. So he adds sir once he knows he's getting rum.
Yep. Instructions, sir? Brashen phrased it carefully. I wish to make clear in advance how my orders are to be followed, specifically as regards yourself. That stiffened the man again. Sir? He asked coldly. Brashen leaned back in his chair. He kept his voice flat. The crew's performance during the pirate attack was abysmal. They were fragmented and disorganized. They need to learn to fight as a unit. I ordered you to mingle the former slaves with the rest of the crew. This has not been done to my satisfaction. Therefore, I now direct you to shift them to the second mate's watch and let her integrate them. Make it clear to them that this is not due to any dissatisfaction with their performance. I don't want them to believe they are being punished. They're likely to take that way. They're used to working for me. They may be surly about the change. See that they aren't. My second direction has to do with talking to the figurehead. Lavoy's eyes widened, only briefly, only slightly, but enough to make Brashen sure. Lavoy had already disobeyed that order. His heart dropped another notch. It was worse than he had feared. He kept his voice steady as he went on. I'm about to lift my order forbidding the crew from speaking to Paragon. I wish you to understand, however, that you are still barred from talking with him. For reasons of discipline and ship's morale, I will allow you to keep that restriction a private matter between you and myself. Nevertheless, I will not tolerate even the appearance of your violating it. You are not to converse with the figurehead. So Brashen's laying down some ground rules for Lavoy here and trying to break up Lavoy's gathering of a crew, like an elite crew that
Right.
responds only to him.
Right. Which is good. I think it's good to try to break that up. Probably should have done it before now, but I guess this is like the first time he had real evidence.
Yeah.
So I get it. I'm just being nitpicky because it's Brashen.
Well, hindsight too, you know?
Yeah, also that. But I also feel like in some ways this is not going super well. I mean, after he says you're not allowed to talk to Paragon, which how is he going to enforce that? Clearly he's already broken that rule. You can't keep eyes on him the whole time. But Lavoy gets angry and says, "Can I ask why?" And Brashen's like, "No."
You don't need to.
You don't need to know. Well, okay, I don't necessarily think that's a great answer to that. Like, I guess it's trying to reassert that, like, I'm in charge and you're not.
Yeah.
I don't need to bring you into my confidence. Like, I'm in charge. But it's still, I feel like, maybe not the best idea. And then Lavoy, as Brashen puts it, struggles to act like an innocent man.
It's like, how am I supposed to do my job at that? What if this happens? What if this happens? And Brashen he says he wants to wring the man's neck, but he kept his seat and managed to keep the demeanor of a captain. If the job is beyond you, Lavoy, say so. You may step down from it. There are other capable hands aboard. Meaning that woman. You'd pull me down and let her step up to first mate. His eyes went black with fury. Well, I'll tell you something. She wouldn't make it through her first watch as mate. The men wouldn't accept her. You and she can pretend she has what it takes, but she doesn't. She's enough. You have your orders. Go. He didn't want this to end in blows. Lavoy wasn't a man who learned from a beating. He'd only carry a grudge. Lavoy, I took you on when no one else would have you. What I offered you was clear. A chance to prove yourself. You still have that chance. Become the first mate you're capable of being. But don't try to be more than that on this ship. Take my orders and see that they're carried out. That is your only task. Do less, and I'll have you put off the ship the first chance I get. I won't keep you on as an ordinary sailor. You wouldn't allow that to work for any of us. You can think about what I've said. Now get out. As he's turned and walking to the door, Brashen speaks up and says, I'm still willing to let this conversation remain a private matter. I suggest you do the same. Sir, Lavoy said, it was not agreement. It was bare acknowledgement that Brashen had spoken. And Brashen finishes that saying he hadn't solved anything. He had perhaps bought himself more time.
So what do you think of this tactic of Brashen, of how he's handled Lavoy in this?
I think it's okay. I think Brashen is still too caught up on what a captain should be like. And, the demeanor of a captain and everything like that, which I guess if there's some tradition in what a captain is like and how they're supposed to act, sure. Stick to that formality. You're in it for your first time. But I think he's handled them okay because when you were complaining about, like, you don't need to know.
Yeah.
I feel like if Brashen had offered him a reason why, Lavoy would have just done what he did in the next paragraph and try to poke holes in that. It just doesn't give you any benefit to explain it to Lavoy, right?
I guess, yeah.
Like, if you give him a reason, then he's just going to be like, well, no, this is why that reason sucks.
Right. Well, I also find it very interesting that Lavoy immediately went to, I don't know who's been talking bad about me, but it's not like that. Because, like, he specifically says something to those lines, or to that effect. And I find that interesting. He thinks people are talking about him behind his back.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard because I don't like how this is handled, but I also don't have an answer to what would make it better.
Right.
And
And I mean, that's the way that Brashen feels too. He's
Yeah.
like, I didn't solve anything. This is just buying me time. I just need to get to Vivacia, basically.
Yeah. Basically, I've let him know I know what he's doing and he
Yeah.
needs to stop. And if that works, hopefully it will work, but it probably won't.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know.
Between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. And I think you're right about one thing that holds Brashen back is this idea that he has to act a certain way to be a captain instead of realizing he is the captain. He gets to make the rules now.
Right.
And that's something I don't know.
The reason I get it for this ship, like that I spoke up and saying like, yeah, he is still too stuck on that, but it kind of makes sense for him, is because this crew is a bunch of misfits. They are unruly beyond unruly. They're the dregs that they could find on the docks. So having that stereotypical structure of like, this is how a strong, aloof captain should act might give them more structure to adhere to and more authority. Yeah.
But I think also being a strong, aloof captain has really had a disadvantage of making it so Lavoy is better known and gives Lavoy more of that chance to undermine him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And it's hard. Like, I mean, I don't know the answer, like I said, but watching it happen, I'm like, oh, this clearly isn't right.
Well, so Brashen is sitting in his cabin here, and he's like, well, I did 2 of my tough tasks that I had to do after this whole thing. I spoke to Paragon and confronted Lavoy. Now I have to do my final one. I still need to straighten things out with Althea. But the ship's taunt came back to him. So angry her fury had gone from hot to cold. He knew exactly what the ship meant and didn't doubt the truth of his words. He tried to find the courage to summon her, then abruptly decided he'd wait until the end of her watch. That would be better. He went to his bunk, pulled off his boots, loosened his shirt, and flung himself back, but didn't sleep. He dreaded the encounter, not for what words she might fling at him, but for how much he desired the excuse to be alone with her. Oh, Althea.
So pretty, so cool.
Oh, they're so alike.
I mean, truly. They match well.
Half derogatory, half complimentary.
True.
Yeah, so it's Brashen's like, okay, wait till the end of her watch, then I'll talk to her about this.
Definitely not because he's putting it off, but just because that makes more sense. And then we go over to Althea on her watch, and it's raining, but she's talking about how things have changed for her. Mm-hmm. So, and where people are right now. So Jack is on watch at the front of the ship to look out for logs, because with the storm, logs are more likely to be in the water, and Jack has a good eye for seeing obstacles well before they're in a dangerous place, I guess. So she can yell up to who she has on the wheel.
And Paragon preferred Jack up there because she can make silences companionable rather than just avoidance. Accusatory, yeah. So Althea's just talking about how she has found the right places for her crew, and she has settled in to her role as second mate for her shift.
Right. And it's 100% because she's stopped thinking about anybody but herself, and she's really focused in on her task. And once she stopped thinking about the man, everything became clear. The man being Brashen.
Althea chewed over her problems. Brashen, she told herself stubbornly, was not among them. Letting a man distract her from her real goals had been her greatest error. Now that she knew his true opinion of her, she could set him aside and focus all her efforts on regaining her own life.
It reads like a teenager, which I guess technically she is, right? She's like 19. 20. She might be 20, yeah.
She started out at like 19,
so no longer a teenager, no excuse.
No, it's just so annoying.
It's so petulant of like, I've really doubled down and worked on myself, and it's all because I stopped caring. But like, clearly she does care a lot and is still thinking about it.
Yeah. Since the day of battle, Althea had raised her own expectations of herself. It did not matter that Brashen regarded her as incompetent and weak, as long as she held herself to a high personal standard.
It's hard because on the one hand, I'm very much like,
good for you.
Yeah.
Raise your standard for your own work. That's
yeah,
great.
you should be able to empower yourself. You should not be doing things
Yeah.
to make others happy. But on the other hand, it really feels like you're still doing this to make Brashen believe in you. Like, maybe if I just work on myself a little bit more, then he'll respect me, is the undercurrent that I'm reading in this. The subtext, if you will.
Oh, man. It's just also like overthinking everything.
Right.
I don't know. It's like, oh, yeah, obviously his true feelings about me are I'm
Yeah.
incompetent and weak.
And-
So I can just push him aside now.
Right. And now she centered her life on the ship and seeing that it ran perfectly. She had tightened discipline on her own watch, not with blows and shouts as Lavoy did, but with simple insistence that every task be done exactly as she commanded, and had uncovered both weaknesses and strengths in her deckhands.
Yeah, so she found places and like she says, the weaknesses and strengths of each of her hands and can place them at the perfect position. So it's running smoothly for her.
Which I just like, not to take her down a peg because I hate doing that.
That's
but
her job, though.
That's literally her job. And she's been doing this for months and she just now figured it.
Yeah.
She just now is paying enough attention to do her job.
That's what I was thinking too during
that.
I was just like, Althea.
Like she's so proud of herself for doing her job for the first time in 2 months. Right. Okay. And it's hard. Like, again, I don't want to take her down a peg because, like,
and it is a crew of misfits too.
Yes.
You know, understandably, like she said she's very proud of herself for not having to speak sharply for 2 days to her crew. Like, yeah, great. She's got it running nicely now. And yes, it's a crew of misfits, so you might need to speak sharply to people once in a while, but like.
And you know what? I do think it's really impressive that she found her own way of being in charge.
Yeah.
That isn't the same as Lavoy's. It's not using violence. It's just saying, hey, I know you can do this.
Well, she also knows that she wouldn't have been able to use violence because she is physically weaker than a lot of her crew members.
Right.
And she's kind of harped on that. So yeah, she had to find a different way, and she did. Yeah.
And I do think it is good that she was able to kind of come into her own in leadership. And I think that's really important and a good skill for her to have learned. But again, why is this the first time she's thought about it when they've been on the ship for however long they've been on the ship for? It just feels a little bit like, I don't know, not great.
So she runs through this whole monologue in her head about how everything is great on her shift. Everything is so good. So there was little excuse for Brashen to appear on the deck during her watch when he should have been sleeping. She could have forgiven it if the storm had been taxing her crew to the utmost, but the weather was only nasty, not dangerous. Twice she encountered him on her patrol of the deck. The first time he had met her eyes and offered her good evening. She had returned the courtesy gravely and continued on her way. She had noted he was on his way to the foredeck. Perhaps, she had reflected ironically, he was watching Jack at her duties. The second time she encountered him, he had the grace to be discomfited. He halted before her and made some inconsequential comment about the storm. She agreed it was unpleasant and made to move past him. Althea, his voice stopped her. She turned back to him. Sir? She asked correctly. He stood staring at her. She saw him blink cold rain from his eyes. Served him right. He had no real errand to bring him out on the deck in this weather. She watched him grope for an excuse. He took a breath and then explains that he's lifting up the...
Right. That actually really got under my skin of like, why would Brashen be out here? He has no reason. He is the captain.
Yeah, he's probably going to go to the foredeck to watch Jack. Obviously, he went to talk to Paragon. He had the comment from Paragon of being like, I'm not going to kill you. And then also about Althea, she really hates you.
Yep.
So then he meets her on the way back to his cabin and is like, hey, Althea, I want to say stuff, but I guess I won't, and I'll summon you later. So I'm just going to let you talk to Paragon now.
Just so you know, well, no, because it's after her shift finishes that people will be allowed to talk to Paragon.
Right, yes.
So she's not allowed to talk to him, but she will be soon. But it's like, obviously why he was out there. And then she just kind of ignores the whole thing that she had of like, he has no reason to be here. And then just goes into, Well, anyway.
Because she's latched onto the thought that he thinks that she's incompetent and weak. So any sign of Brashen is like, oh, why are you here?
Yeah, you're
Why
just
are
here
you
to try
here?
to undermine my power.
Yeah.
You don't trust me to run my ship.
Also, I don't need to think about you ever.
Also, I'm never thinking about you anymore. You don't even cross my mind.
So she correctly responds to him very succinctly, like, yes, so you said. Great. Good. Good night, sir.
Yeah.
He stood there a moment longer as if expecting her to say more, but there was nothing more for the second mate to say to the captain about this announcement. He was about to change an order. She would see her crew obeyed it. She continued to give him her attention until he nodded briefly, then walked away from her. After that, she had gone back to work.
And then she thinks about Paragon and having the chance to talk to him again.
Yeah, it would lift Amber's spirits, she says, because the carpenter had brooded darkly since Paragon had killed.
Right. When they spoke of it, she had always blamed Lavoy for it, insisting that the mate had incited the ship to it. Althea personally could not disagree, but nor could a second mate agree with such a statement. Therefore, she had held her tongue, which had only exasperated Amber. Althea's the worst. I love Althea. She's not the worst. But in this moment, that is so annoying. And I get that, like, you have a role to play. That's she and Brashen are all about this. I'm playing a role, so I can't possibly talk bad about the mate or the first mate. And it's like, first of all, Amber's barely crew. Second of all, you have to have time to gossip with your friends. Like, what are you talking about? It's only right if I stick by first mate. When has that ever stopped you from talking crap about anybody? Just agree. Like,
See, this is why we don't let women on our ships. They just gossip and talk crap behind our backs.
you know what? Gossip used to be a positive thing.
The only form of entertainment. Yeah, Amber is obviously, and for good reason, frustrated with Althea for not speaking up, because Althea is, like you said, doing the same thing that Brashen's done and just holding herself apart.
Right.
And she's focusing so much on her own self that she's shut everything out.
Yeah,
including her friends.
It's really selfish in a way.
It is.
And I mean, I get her feelings are hurt right now. And so she's like trying to protect her feelings or whatever. But it's just annoying because it's childish and not productive. And she continuously does this thing where she gets mad and just shuts everybody out without any shred of evidence.
Althea runs away.
Yeah.
She's a runner, for sure. She likes to confront Kyle, and she likes to confront people about Vivacia themselves, but for anything that's kind of like coming at her slantwise, she runs away from it.
I think if it has something to do with her feelings, like she doesn't care about Kyle. Nothing Kyle could do to her hurts her in a personal way. I mean, obviously taking her away from her ship hurt her, but nothing else Kyle does is ever going to have any effect on her because she doesn't care about Kyle. She hates him. And same with other people. I feel like there's no closeness there. And so nothing they could do would hurt her in any way. So of course she can confront that. But if it's something that actually has to do with feelings, like her mom saying, hey, I'm the one who convinced your dad to do this, and like, let's work this out, then she runs. Or if it's her sister, she runs. When it's Brashen, she runs.
There's also, when it's Paragon, she runs too.
Yeah.
Althea knew what she personally would do, speaking of Paragon here. She would treat it as she had treated all of Paragon's sins. She would ignore it. She would not speak of it to the ship any more than she had ever really spoken of how he had twice capsized and killed all his crew. Some acts were too monstrous to recognize with words. So, just gonna ignore it.
Yep, like every other problem she has.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, right? Like that's why Paragon is able to have a connection with Lavoy, because people kind of just ignore who he is and what has happened to his past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not healthy to just ignore the problem, to just pretend like it doesn't exist and move on, pretend like it didn't happen. Let's just keep going.
That's one of the captains of Paragon, after he had capsized and awoken the first time, one of the old Ludlucks. They just sailed him like he was a regular old ship for a while. And it worked for a while, but eventually he capsized again, you know?
Right.
Like, it doesn't help anybody to bottle that up.
No.
And just run away.
Yeah, it's not good. And it's not what Paragon needs. And unfortunately, that's just who Althea is.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit Brashen too. I mean, at least Brashen kind of brought it up after Paragon did. But he is truthful and will talk about it. I think if Althea was in that position where Paragon would say, like, are you afraid of me? She'd be like, no, of course not. And like lie and then change the subject. I don't know.
She does talk about how she doesn't really need to talk to Paragon because her connection to live ships and her connection with Vivacia kind of opens her up to that connection with other live ships, lets him feel the depth of her disapproval for those actions. And she says that she's only met with defiance and anger. He felt justified in what he had done. He was angry that no one else shared that emotion. She added that to her unending list of mysteries about Paragon, which, like, those specific emotions can't fully encapsulate what Paragon is feeling either.
Right.
So, yeah, just kind of taking what's on the surface and extrapolating it. And that's what she does too. That's what she did with Brashen. That's what she's doing with Paragon now. I don't know. She has her idea of how things are and doesn't want to get rid of that or get challenged on those ideas.
Right.
She thought she was the best sailor ever. And, you know, we all hate Kyle, but Kyle was kind of right that she wasn't a great sailor.
Right.
To begin with. She knew what she was doing in most roles. She just wasn't a sailor.
Yeah.
She, you know, gets, I don't know, all of these things, just has an idea in her head about how life is or how this certain
what something means.
Yeah, or
what somebody
means.
Actually means, instead of asking for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do, quick aside, and I'm going to bring this up again at the end of the chapter, but I feel like, especially in this moment, this little moment of whenever she touches Paragon, he knows her feelings, but she knows the feelings back. That's not something we really see Brashen talk about, at least not in the same way. Like with Althea, it's like, of course she can feel his feelings back and it makes sense and she can read into how he's feeling. I'm wondering why Althea is so able to connect in this way, because Paragon kind of is choosing Brashen as his chosen family, not Althea. Like Paragon doesn't treat Althea in a way like she's going to be his captain and he wants her to be the connection, if that makes sense.
We also don't see Brashen think about times that he has touched Paragon. We don't see it from his point of view. Like this chapter, we see it from Paragon's point of view.
Right.
When we have Brashen's point of view, he's talking to people and not thinking about his conversation with Paragon in those terms of emotions. So I just don't think that's what Brashen thinks about. And it's not really in his character to think about that. So he could be going through those same things. He could be feeling those emotions as well and responding to some things like that. But I don't know, maybe Althea's the only one who really thinks in those terms.
I was just wondering if maybe Althea has more inherent skill or something, like she is more capable of connecting two ships on a deeper level.
Because she did have, like I mentioned before, she did have that connection with Vivacia, that she was trapped in her room for a week, just sleeping on the floor, not eating or drinking water much, and just dreaming dragon dreams and old Vestrit dreams.
Yeah. So I feel like, I'm not saying that Brashen has no connection with Paragon. I just feel like Althea's specific connection with the ship feels deeper in a way that hasn't been explored. with Paragon, and it's very similar to the way that Wintro talks about his bond with Vivacia. And like not the same obviously, but it's similar to the way that they share a bond and can share feelings and stuff. And it feels like Althea feels that way on every live ship she's been on, where she just can understand them and has some weird connection with them. And I'm wondering if that's, I mean, it could just be that she's way more open to sharing herself with live ships in general.
So I think she wants that connection. She misses it so much with Vivacia.
So she's just always reaching out.
Yeah.
But also I'm just wondering if like that's also because she's stronger in the skill
maybe
than other people. I don't know. Just a thought.
Her thoughts do turn to Vivacia, how she does miss Vivacia underneath her, and she's just thinking like, that's the only worry in my life that matters right now. From what the boy had said before Paragon killed him, Kenneth would not be open to a ransom offer, especially not a humble one. So between the choices of force and deceit, we don't really have the force to take Vivacia back, so we'll have to think of a plan through deceit to get Vivacia.
But that's also a scary option because that leaves Lavoy with the power.
Yeah, because if they're going to play act as pirates or something like that, it kind of leans into the dubious law-abiding crew that they have.
Right.
And, you know,
morals aren't their strong suit.
Yeah, maybe they'll take to that occupation rather than legal sailors. So it's on her mind, and that's kind of her biggest worry, and she's trying to push out all other worries and problems away just to focus on that.
Time was what she needed. Time to concoct a better plan, time to understand this poor mad ship, but time burned through her hands like a wild line. Every watch carried them closer to Divvytown, Kenneth's stronghold.
Similar thoughts that Brashen had.
And honestly, very similar to Wintro in the way Wintro tackles problems. It's very much like,
just give me more time.
If I had more time, I could figure it out. And it's like, I'm not doing really anything to spend time that I do have to figure it out. But if you gave me more, for sure it would work out.
Right.
So I just found that a little bit humorous that it made me think of Wintro in the early days when he was dealing with the slaves and in the stronghold and Kenneth and Cyrilla. And
that's how Cyrilla acts too.
Yeah, you're right.
In Bingtown. Just give me more time and I can solidify my position here.
It's so interesting, this theme that is snaking through of, if I only had a little bit more time, everything would be fine.
So the shift change is coming on. Lavoy's on deck and all the crew's kind of assembled, and they hear Brashen's new orders about Paragon and everything like that. She sees that Lavoy is glowering at her, but the hostility no longer surprises her. It was part of her job. Brashen speaks his piece. She listens impassively as he lifts the ban on speaking to the figurehead. As she expected, Amber's face expressed her relief. When Brashen went on to move men off her watch in order to shift the former slaves onto it, she managed to hold her peace. Without even consulting her, he had undone her careful efforts to make her watch operate as efficiently as possible. Now, as they sailed deeper every day into pirate territory, he had made her responsible for men she scarcely knew, men that perhaps Lavoy had been inciting to mutiny. A fine addition to her watch. She seethed silently, but gave no sign of her outrage.
This is part of the job, Althea. Yep. Managing people.
He is your boss.
It's like so frustrating because it's just because she's mad at Brashen that she hates this. Also,
he's not doing this just to spite you, Althea.
Yes, and on top of that, to be like, I can't believe he didn't consult with me after she's been spending all this time to be like, I'm just second mate. Yeah. I don't have a duty to do anything else. There's no conversation we could have. And then she's like, oh, how dare he not tell me beforehand that he's doing this? And he didn't even ask. He's doing this because I was doing too good. He just wants to see me fail. And it's like, the only reason you know that these are the people that Lavoy has been training is because he let you in on that.
Right.
Like, clearly there's a plan here. I get it though. Like, it would be scary to have dangerous people on your watch that you can't trust after you've built this rapport. But still.
So she's really angry. Her anger kills her appetite, and she just goes back to her stateroom. For once, it's empty, and she knew a moment of guilt that she avoided the figurehead because she knows that Amber and maybe even Jack are talking to Paragon already,
Right.
but she just wants some time. She had removed not only Brashen from her softer emotions, but also the ship and Amber. It was simpler so, and better. She could function most efficiently as a mate when she had let no personal consideration stand between her and her tasks.
Super healthy.
Yep.
Definitely the way you should do things is just when you have a bad time, just start cutting off the people in your life that care about you, that you care about.
She decides she needs to sleep, and as she's starting to get ready for it, there's a knock on her door, and she hisses in annoyance, saying, "What is it?" Clef's voice says something quietly through the door, and she snatches it open and says, "What?" Clef took 2 steps back. "Captain wants to see you," he blurted. His startled face was a dash of cold reality. She took a breath and smoothed her features. "Thank you," she said brusquely, and shut the door again. Why couldn't Brashen have taken care of whatever it was when she mustered on deck with the others? Why did he have to cut into what little privacy and sleep she could find? She stuffed her shirt tail back into her trousers and slammed out of the room. So mad, and we switch back over to Brashen to confront this whirlwind of anger.
Yes. I really feel like she just stokes her anger on purpose. Like,
Oh, she does, for
it's
sure.
way easier to be angry at people, I guess, which is why.
Same with Paragon.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, Brashen on his end thinks that it must be Lavoy at the door or a different hand to say something important has happened because of the way that the banging on the door is happening. And instead it's Althea.
You sent Clef for me, sir. His heart sank in him. I did. He acknowledged and then could find no words. After a moment, sit down, he invited her. But she took the chair stiffly as if he had ordered it. She sat, meeting his eyes with an unflinching gaze. Captain Ephraim Vestrit had always been able to stare him down. When your father looked at me like that, I knew I was in for a private reprimand that would leave my ears smoking. At the shocked look on her face, he realized he had spoken the words aloud. He was horrified, yet fought a wild impulse to laugh at her expression. He leaned back in his chair and managed to keep his face composed and his voice level as he added, "So why don't you just say it, and we'll be done with it?" She glared at him. He could feel the pressure building, and then all of a sudden she takes a deep breath, and surprisingly, she lets it out, and in a quiet, controlled voice that still shook slightly, she said, "That's not my place, sir."
I a little bit want to say growth, but also because
it's growth for a petty and unhealthy reason, but it's growth.
It is growth because you know what? If this was Kyle and the start of the book, she would have just yelled at him. It wouldn't have mattered that there's like other things to think about.
She wouldn't have waited to be summoned. She would have stormed to his room, opened up the door and yelled at him.
So yeah, so I think like growth, but also super petty and very much like, sir.
So Brashen is deliberately nudging at this anger that's still there, determined to clear the air between them because he can't stand her being so angry.
Right. And you know what? Good on Brashen for confronting the problem
instead of healthy work environment, let alone personal relationship environment. That's not a healthy work environment.
True, but I mean, I feel like that's also growth on his part that he is making her talk, knowing that she's not going to come to it herself, but saying, you know what, we do need to talk it out instead of like last time when they both got mad and then just pretended it never happened.
Yeah. So he basically says, "I believe I gave you permission to speak, so speak," like as an order. He says, "Very well. I find it difficult to perform my duties when my captain obviously has no respect for me. You humiliate me in front of the crew and then expect me to keep my watch in order. It isn't right and it isn't fair." "What?" he demanded, outraged. How could she say such things after he had taken her on as a working mate, entrusted his private plans to her, even consulted with her on what was best for the vessel? "When have I ever humiliated you in front of the crew?" "During the battle. I was doing my best to repel boarders. You not only stepped in and took the task from me, but also said to me, 'Get back, stay safe.' As if I were a child you must shelter. As if I were less competent than Clef, who you kept by your side. I did not, he defended himself. Then he halted his words at the flare of fury on her face. Did I? You did. Ask Clef, I'm sure he remembers. He was silent. He could not recall saying such words, but he did recall the lurch of fear in his heart at the sight of Althea in the midst of the fighting. Had he said such a thing? His heart sank with guilt. In the heat of battle and the chill of fear, probably he had. He imagined the affront to her pride and her confidence. How could he say such a thing to her in the midst of a fight and expect her to keep her self-respect? He deserved her anger. He moistened his lips. I suppose I did. If you say I did, I know I did. It was wrong. I'm sorry.
I think it's very big of Brashen to admit that he was wrong and to realize his mistake and be genuine about it. He's not trying to argue that, well, it's just because I care about you or, you know, whatever. He's not making excuses. He's acknowledging the problem and he's apologizing, which is really good. And I also think it's interesting that, like, he doesn't even remember doing it, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to take responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. And he immediately understands why she's so upset.
Because he does trust her. He does believe her.
Yes. Which, to be fair, his actions have showed.
Yeah. Which is why I'm frustrated with Althea. It's like, he thinks I'm the worst. He doesn't trust me to do my job. He thinks I'm incompetent.
No, I don't know. I think I get it. I get why she was upset, but also I find it very interesting because after he looks up from this apology,
she's shocked.
She is shocked. Her eyes were very wide. And it's kind of crazy to me that she's shocked that he would apologize and admit he's wrong, because I feel like Brashen has always been that way. Like, he apologized for the stinky comment that he made, like, whenever he got mad and said that she smelled anyway.
It's because she has the idea in her head of how this is going to be. You know, it's also similar to Malta. Like, how Malta has her scenes, the romantic scenes in her head, and they never turn out correctly.
Right.
Althea probably had this planned out in her head. Like, oh, I'm going to confront him, and
he's going to
deny, and then I'm going to fight back, and I'm going to show him that I'm strong or whatever. And that's not Brashen.
No.
He struggles to desperately retain and regain his control because her eyes are wide and he's like, he could fall into the depths of them.
He's just so in love. He's swooning and thinking about how pretty she is. And then he's like, no, we need to fix this problem first.
He says, I have great faith in you, Althea. You've stood beside me and we faced crimpers and serpents. We put this damn ship back in the water together. But during the battle, I can't do this, he said suddenly. I can't go on like this anymore. What? She spoke slowly, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. He surged to his feet and leaned over the table. I can't go on pretending I don't love you. I can't pretend it doesn't scare me spitless to see you in danger. She shot to her feet as if he had threatened her. She turned from him, but 2 strides carried him to stand between her and the door. She stood like a doe at bay. At least hear me out, he begged. The words rushed out of him. He wouldn't consider how stupid they would sound to her, or that he could never call them back again. You say you can't perform your duties without my respect. Don't you know the same is true for me? Damn it, a man has to see himself reflected somewhere to be sure he is real. I see myself in your face, and how your eyes follow me when I'm handling something well, and how you grin at me when I've done something stupid but manage to make it come out all right in the end. When you take that away from me, when... She's just stood there, shocked and staring. His heart sank. His words came out as a plea. Althea, I am so damn lonely. Worst is to know that whether we fail or succeed, I still lose you. Knowing that you are every day here on the same ship with me and I cannot so much as share a meal with you, let alone touch your hand, is torment enough. When you will not look at me or speak to me, can't go on with this coldness between us. I can't.
Just a quick aside, if a guy was sharing his feelings to me and part of that was, I'm just really lonely, I would be like, okay, like that's not romantic, but but also
But what if it was me who was saying that?
I'd be like, really? You like me because you're lonely? Like
That's not what he says, and you know you wouldn't act that way. With your little evil laugh and grin right now.
All right, it's a little sweet, but but I still like taking the meeting to be what he doesn't mean.
Yes.
But Althea isn't taking it that way, luckily. She does not share my affinity for being able to reword things.
Althea's cheeks were very pink.
And then she says, one of us has to be sensible.
She wrapped her arms tightly around herself as if she feared she might fly apart. Let me pass, Brashen. Her voice was a whisper. He couldn't. Just let me hold you, just for a moment, and then I'll let you go. He pleaded, knowing he lied. We switch over to Althea, who starts, he was lying and they both knew it.
Yeah. So, yeah. But, I mean, this is really cute because finally the feelings are out in the open. There's no more assuming the other knows or guessing.
Right.
It's out now.
We've gone through the classic miscommunication rom-com moment. And
Yes.
This is the standing in the rain, or in this case, standing out from the rain and drying on the inside.
Well, because Althea was just out in the rain, so.
Yes.
And he does make mention that her hair is starting to dry in little curls that frame her face so elegantly. He's down bad.
Just for a moment would never be enough for either of them. Her breath was coming hard when his calloused palm touched her jaw. She was suddenly dizzied. She reached out a hand to his chest just to steady herself, perhaps even to push him away. Sure. And that was all. She would not be so stupid as to allow this. But his flesh was warm through his shirt and she could feel his heart beating. Her traitor hand clutched the fabric and pulled him closer. He spoke softly after they've been hugging for a little bit and says, "Oh, Althea, why must it always be so complicated for us? Because you're both frustrating people."
Yes. Because their communication styles are similar enough to be annoying.
Yeah.
Because they're opposite and similar.
Kisses the top of her head, and suddenly it all seemed very simple to her. When he bent to kiss her ear and the side of her neck, she turned her mouth to meet his and closed her eyes. Let it happen then.
He stops the
Says, "Wait."
makeout session and locks the door.
She says he had come to his senses. She reeled with disappointment as he turned away from her. He walked to the door, and he bolts it.
And then returning, he kisses the palm of her hand and waits for her to make the next move. And so she drags him to the bed.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, chicka, wow, wow. And then we switch over to Paragon. We fade to black.
Yes.
And switch over to Paragon's point of view. And Amber is talking with him.
Yeah. And it's doing the whole, I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah. But also, Amber is saying, I don't think you truly understand what you did. Paragon, you have to learn what it means to a man to die. I don't think you grasp the finality of what you did. Do you think that's true? Because I don't believe that. I think that's what Amber wants to believe.
I think that's what Amber wants to believe.
And I think Paragon fully understands
Death. Yeah. No. I absolutely agree with you that
although it is a different thing for a live ship to experience it because you're absorbing and can relive those memories, right? To you,
true, yeah.
the deaths stay with you, the lives stay with you.
Right.
But Paragon's been through a lot of deaths.
Yeah, I feel like this is an infantilization of Paragon on Amber's part that almost doesn't make sense to me. I don't like.
I think it does because I think it makes sense to you too if you think about how you have phrased Amber before, of how she always tries to believe the best in everybody and sees that there's a positive side to things. I think that is what she's trying to do with Paragon. Just saying, like, I believe in you. Like, yeah, this was a bad thing, but I don't think it's your fault either.
Yeah.
You just gotta learn, buddy. Buddy old pal.
And I almost want to say maybe she just can't understand that like good people can be murderers, but then also Fitz is her catalyst. So,
right.
So like, I don't know. And that doesn't, Fitz killing people doesn't make beloved.
Yeah, but he doesn't like it, so it's fine.
He never revels in it, so it's okay. I don't know.
He just goes berserk mode in battles.
He just blacks out, comes too covered in blood. No, I don't know. I find it an interesting choice that Amber in this moment is trying to be like, no, it's fine. You didn't know, and now you do know, so we won't do it again, will we?
But yeah, she does say, this is why I can forgive you, but this is the only time. Like, don't do it again.
Right. And on Paragon's part, he's not mad at this generalization. He doesn't agree, but he just doesn't want Amber to be sad anymore.
Yeah.
And he's trying to make her happy. He's trying to go within himself to find something to say to make her happy.
And he says her sadness, when she let him feel it, went deeper than any human's. It was almost as grievous as his own. Another interesting thing to say, like, Amber's not a human.
Mm-hmm. But also, why is Amber's sadness so grievous? Why is it so deep? Because she
sees a lot of the future, a lot of the past lives, a lot of grief, and a lot of those things. I mean, spent years with King Shrewd, and King Shrewd's asking to like see events, and
right.
I don't know. Amber's going through, or the fool at the time is going through all these different scenarios and deaths and things like that. So the fool has lived a lot of lives that have ended, has experienced a lot of grief, more than humans can.
Yeah. True. Fair enough. But as Paragon's going inward to find something to say, he feels something that he recognizes but is confused by.
Something was happening, something dangerous, something frightening. He had known this before, and he braced himself for the retching agony and shame of it. When humans came together like that, it always meant pain for the weaker one. What had made Brashen so angry with her? Why was she allowing it? Why wasn't she fighting him? So, very, very sad. Amber is asking, like, hey, are you listening to me? And he's like, no, I'm not.
And he's kind of freaking out, which makes sense. And this really does feel like, I don't know, like a trauma response where he's experienced this thing and he knows it as one thing and is.
It's a completely new experience to him, because he's thinking like, he didn't understand this. He had thought he knew what this meant. If Brashen did not mean to punish her, if he was not trying to master her with pain, then why was he doing this? Why was Althea allowing it? So it's just, he literally cannot grasp the concept of consent.
Yeah.
In this case.
Sex. He doesn't understand sex, I guess, because all he's ever experienced
is humans.
Yeah. All he's ever experienced through the human on board is rape, which is different. And it's not at all the same. And so he's confused because they are similar, but not at all. And he's just like, what's happening? What is this? And it causes him to go even deeper and remember times as a dragon, I guess.
Yeah. This was not what he had thought it was. He had thought he understood humans and how they hurt one another, but this was different. This was something else, something he could almost recall. Timidly, he shut his eyes he no longer had. He let his thoughts float and felt ancient memories soar in him. Then we have a final small paragraph that switches over to Althea. And they're cuddling together afterwards, and she's sighing, and he smelled good like the sea and the ship and himself. When she held him, she held all those things within her. Almost, she breathed softly, almost I thought we were flying.
This was the other thing I wanted to bring up when I earlier talked about how I feel like Althea is really strong in the skill. Like, I feel like this is another instance where she was somehow connected with Paragon.
I feel like that is because she shared the memories that Vivacia had. when she was on deck with Vivacia before Vivacia was awakened. I think it just opened her up to those kinds of connections more.
Okay. Yeah, definitely could be.
Yeah.
It's just, especially with that, where we have Paragon relating what he's feeling happening in the cabin with his past life of being a dragon. And we know that dragons mate in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And then having Althea say it felt like we were flying or whatever.
Yeah.
It just like clearly they were connected in that in some weird way, which I hate this aspect of the Robin Hobb books where like sex is connected with other third party beings that are
like
not
Night Eyes.
Yes, I hate it. I like, oh, I get why people who are not witted would have a problem with sleeping with people who are witted.
Yeah.
Because that is so awkward. Like, I don't know. It's whatever. It just like feels like an invasion of privacy, but
ooh, he was an animal in bed. Oh, not what I want to hear when there's wit involved.
Oh, this is off topic, but that just gave me a thought. Is there a possibility that B was conceived the time that Night Eyes was in control of Fitz's body with Molly?
No.
Okay.
Are you talking about Nettle?
Nettle. It would have been Nettle, not B.
I don't think so.
Okay. Never mind. Because I was thinking about how like B has Wolf Dad or whatever.
Yeah.
Like somehow can whatever.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that's how, but that makes sense. Night Eyes is gone by then, so never mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the chapter. There's, finally a reunion, I guess, for
reuniting.
Yeah, for Brashen and Althea.
Clear the air.
Yep, they clear the air. Obviously going to complicate things with Lavoy further.
Yes. But it's long overdue, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Amber and Jack will be relieved.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
But I don't know. I said this to you when we were not on the air, but I feel as though this chapter is unnecessarily dark. Like, there's just a lot of instances of darkness in it. And I mean, I think that's fair to say about the series as a whole. There's a lot of darkness that creeps in. But especially, I don't know, that last bit with Paragon, like that trauma, it's so like
we have to remember
hard.
Yeah, it is really hard, but we have to remember that history that he has not been revealed yet.
Yeah, and that's
so this is Robin Hobb slowly hinting to the reader about Paragon's past over multiple chapters and a couple books. And finally, we're kind of piecing together like, oh, okay, so Paragon has had a lot of violence on his decks. He has, like, it wasn't, maybe some Ludlucks were kind of dangerous. We're kind of getting hints that maybe he was a pirate for a while, and now he's never known consensual sex between adults, and it's only assault on his decks. Like, something really bad happened. So it's kind of understandable how he's so messed up.
Right, definitely.
So we're slowly getting this, and then finally we'll get the reveal that Kenneth was the one that went through a lot of this.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. It's just really hard. And the topics are tough to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll always be tough to talk about, but that's why these books are divisive, first of all. Not everybody can read these kinds of books.
Right.
But also why they are so gripping. It's because these are human experiences.
Right.
So we will continue to talk about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you everyone for listening.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any thoughts or opinions, you can email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com or message us on any of our various platforms, social media platforms, where isfitshappy on everything, which is Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Reddit, YouTube.
Nice.
Everything.
Did the spiel.
I did the spiel. I've heard it enough.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope to hear from you.
Now we're going to move on to everyone's favorite portion. You guys bringing your ideas to us. We're going to start first with a Facebook comment, and that is from Ellen, and it's on episode 215, which is all about the Bolt and Kennett and Edda, and I guess Wintro healing. But Ellen makes a really good comment. Ellen says, I have a small issue with one phrasing in this chapter. When Bolt calls Edda a queen, and it says that Edda knew it was what female dragons were called. How? How could she know that? No human could have possibly known that when they've been gone for so many generations. And I think that's a really good point that I genuinely hadn't thought about. What is your thought?
Yeah, I have no idea either. The only thing I can think of is that my theory is a little bit proved there, with Bolt kind of twining into the mind and influencing Edda a little bit and providing that knowledge even subconsciously.
Okay.
But that's my only thought on that, really. Otherwise, I think it might be an error, because I don't remember Queen ever being talked about like that.
Yeah.
With Edda.
I guess because it's information that I know because I'm a rereader, it just felt like, yeah, of course. I also didn't know until reading this book, I guess, that female cats are also called queens.
Oh, are they?
That's what Edda says. She says in that chapter, she says something like, just like female cats, female dragons are called queens.
Oh,
like that's part of the phrasing whenever she is thinking about that.
I didn't catch that.
I think you read it.
I know.
but you didn't like absorb it.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true. Hold on. I don't even know how to Google that. So according to Google, if a female cat has not been neutered, she is known as a queen. Unneutered males are called toms, so only the girls are true royalty. That's from cats.org.uk.
Interesting.
So I guess knowing that it says that thing about cats, that potentially could explain dragons are animals. This other animal also goes by queen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what the dragon means.
That specific phrase is queen. Edda knew that by the term, the dragon meant no more than female. Female dragons were queens like cats.
So, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is, but I kind of feel like it might just be an oversight. Because you're right. How would they know? That like dragons have
Unless
been
Bolt
extinct.
Was twining in their head. You know?
Could be.
Oh, thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. We also got an email from Melissa. And Melissa was writing in to talk about
a couple things.
Yes.
First one is about the cataclysm, kind of. About how the continent has sunk, and just how it's an interesting thing to talk about and think about, because things like that have happened on Earth in the past. Big events can affect the rise of the ocean levels.
Yeah.
Volcanic activity, meteors melting, glaciers.
Causing the ocean
floods,
to rise.
Yeah, glaciers themselves carving out big lakes and things like that. So it's very interesting to see a bunch of things like that. Melissa specifically brings up something that she might be forgetting specific details about, but I want to bring it up because I remember hearing this too, now that she is writing it up here. But some volcanic eruption way back in the past has documentation on the other side of the world as creating years of darkness.
Yeah, like several years of darkness for certain Inuit tribes.
Yeah. So yeah, the cataclysm was great. It sunk half of the continent, as Tintaglia says, into the water.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting topic to think about, for sure.
I guess if you think about a volcano exploding where Kelsingra is, it would then make sense. Because we know, I guess, that
it's not exactly near I mean, it has to be like close to, but there's no lava flow in Kelsingra, which
yeah.
is
So
weird to
maybe it
me,
was a
but
meteor.
it could be on the other side too or
Yes.
something.
However, we do know that this is technically the north where it's colder.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would make sense if it was a meteor or a volcano, and there were glaciers at one point in the area, and those melted because of that cataclysm, raising sea levels to cover things in this area.
Could,
And
yeah.
we know that it's colder here because all the serpents come from the south where it's warmer weather and there's more hunting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's really cool to.
But it's also, I don't think that fully tracks because of what Tintaglia says. Because I think she says it's like drier inland plains is where Kelsingra's from, and now they're the swampy like rain wilds on the coast.
Well, they're swampy, but they were fields that were fertile.
Yeah, so I'm saying like maybe not glaciers right next to it, but around in that area, yeah, the North Continent that we're on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean, we know that I guess I'm just assuming in that area would be the glaciers because the Pirate Isles are presumably the Pirate Isles are the tips of the mountains or what's left of the mountains after being flooded. So,
yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing to think on. I will say it again. I've said it probably 100 times already. I want more information on the cataclysm, years, even vague dates or like aeons ago or something, just give me something about it.
Yeah.
Give me a location for an epicenter,
There. But
be nice.
Melissa also wants to talk about Naomi's comment about gender, and Melissa believes that
it was our conversation about.
I guess, sorry. Let me give more context in case you don't remember.
Yeah, not just about gender. But
no, not just casually.
No, it was our conversation about serpents to dragons gender and if they remain the same, or if like we were talking about maybe accessed one side of the memories depending on what they were born as.
Right, and then also how that translates into
the carvings,
carving for the live ships. So Melissa was saying that she believes that dragons are always one gender, like whatever gender they are, that's it. And it explains why both queens and the male dragons have complete disdain for each other and can't relate to that gender's way of thinking.
Just lives upon generations upon lives, just reinforcing their attitudes.
Exactly. And that they definitely have access to all of their ancestral memories, but because they associate with one gender more than the other, they're mostly just taking information from the other gender, not necessarily feelings and and personality, I guess. Which is really interesting to think about. And then also with the wizard wood, Melissa thinks that maybe there is some sort of like subtle manipulation happening to the carver.
And not on purpose.
No, not on purpose, but just something
that the carvers can get a feel of that like, oh, this piece of wood is this gender. We need to make it into a female likeness.
Yes. And I think Melissa brings up a really good point that a lot of times carvers talk about
revealing something that was already there.
Yes. And Amber, I think, talks about feeling this way about regular wood.
Yeah.
That you're not carving the wood specifically, you're just revealing what was already there. And so it would make sense that other wood carvers would feel the same and would then be able to be influenced. Melissa also goes on to talk about how it then makes sense that Edda's wizard wood charm would be male, because it would be okay with stopping pregnancy, whereas the females do not believe in that. Obviously, because talking with Bolt, female dragons like feel as though continuing on the line is most important. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. And then also wondering if it had to be a male for Kenneth, for Kenneth's charm, because Kenneth's a man. And so if it was a female, it wouldn't have felt right to carve. But that's more not sure, just a feeling.
Yeah. I think the wizard wood charm for Edda is an interesting thing and it's cool headcanon. But with those charms and with Kenneth's bracelet charm, it's just so... Wizard wood is such a scarce material, and they talk about it a lot in the beginning of
Mhm.
how rare it is to get those chunks of wizard wood and
Yeah.
how expensive it is. So I feel like they're they can't pick and choose, you know? The people are just, I need to create this, I have a commission, I need to find any kind of wizard wood I can, and then creating them out of that.
Fair.
But I do like the pregnancy charm bit. You
Yeah.
know? I do like that theory.
Like it only works if it's a
Yeah.
male.
Yeah.
Random side thought from this, but what if the bits of wizard wood that do find its way onto the market is from a Rainwild family who helped carve the wizard wood?
Getting a little bit more money on the side.
Yeah, just mean like I have bits left over from when I was carving.
I mean, I'm sure smugglers.
yeah,
You know?
it's gotta come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Anyway, I think that's a really cool idea to think about in that way. But yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everybody who reaches out. We really enjoy hearing from you guys. It's always fun. And we can't wait to hear from you next week.